Your baby won't stop crying. It has been 3 days. The fever is getting worse. You know something is wrong before you have the words to explain how you know. Today, you would call a doctor. But there is no doctor, no hospital, no medicine, no prescription, no diagnosis, no one trained to walk through the door and tell you what is happening inside that small body. There is not even a word for pediatrician because the concept does not exist yet. For the first 300,000 years of human history, every parent faced the same reality. If your baby got sick, no one was coming. Whatever happened next was entirely on you and on the people close enough to hear the crying. And yet somehow, human babies survived. Not just a few of them, in favorable conditions, in warm climates, with exceptional parents. Enough of them to populate every continent on Earth. Enough of them to become every human being alive today. Enough of them to eventually build the hospitals, the medicine, and the doctors that now make the question seem almost impossible to take seriously. So how did they do it? The answer is not medicine, but it is also not what most people think. And the reason it worked is hidden inside the human body itself, in a place almost nobody looks. And the answer says something surprising about the way we still raise children today. Here is the thing that should bother you. Among mammals, human babies are some of the most dependent infants on the planet. A deer is born and walks within hours. A horseful runs within days. A wildebeest calf keeps up with a stampeding herd inside 20 minutes of life. Even chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, are born with grip strength strong enough to cling to their mother's fur from the first hour. A human infant arrives with none of that. It cannot lift its own head. It cannot regulate its own body temperature. It cannot locate food, signal danger, or protect itself from anything not a cold wind, not a drop in temperature, not a pathogen it has never encountered. For the first months of life, and realistically the first several years, a human baby is more dependent on external care than almost any other mammal that has ever lived. At first glance, human infants look like an evolutionary disadvantage. A creature this dependent on others should have been filtered out long before it could pass its genes forward. So, how did the most dependent infant in the animal kingdom survive long enough for its species to become the dominant force on Earth? Most people, when they hear this question, expect the answer to be medicine. They expect herbs or instinct or the idea that people were simply tougher back then. The real answer is stranger than any of those. And it explains not just how Stone Age babies survived, but why humans built civilization at all. But first, there is a question hiding inside this one that almost nobody asks. If human babies were this helpless, why didn't evolution simply fix that? Why didn't natural selection produce a human infant that could walk sooner, feed itself faster, need less? The answer to that question changes everything, and it starts with your skull. The human brain is extraordinary. It is also enormous, and it grows fast. To pass safely through the birth canal, a human infant must be born before that brain reaches the developmental stage most primates achieve at birth. The skull has to fit, so the brain continues building itself on the outside wiring to language, to faces, to social patterns, absorbing the specific world it finds itself in. Human babies are not born early because something went wrong. They are born early because of a three-way conflict between large brains, narrow pelvises, and walking upright, a compromise our ancestors struck millions of years ago that is still being paid off by every parent alive today. The result is an infant that arrives genuinely unfinished. And an unfinished infant in the Stone Age required something no single family could provide alone. Start with a number that changes the shape of everything. 2. Throughout most of human history, raising a child without help from extended family or community would have been extraordinarily difficult. A human infant requires feeding every 2 to 3 hours. It requires constant physical warmth. It requires someone awake, watching, responding at all hours. And all of that must happen while the group is also hunting, gathering, moving camp, building shelter, and managing everything else that survival demands. The demands compound quickly. Add illness, injury, or bad weather, and the pressure on any small family unit becomes nearly impossible to absorb alone. Anthropologists have spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies on multiple continents groups, whose way of life most closely resembles the conditions our species evolved in. What they found is consistent enough to be called a rule rather than an observation. Throughout most of human history, human infants were rarely raised by parents alone. They were raised by networks. The technical term is cooperative breeding, and among primates, it is almost unique to humans. It means that non-parent adults regularly provide food, care, and physical protection for infants that are not biologically their own. Grandmothers past reproductive age whose bodies still have the capacity and the accumulated knowledge. Aunts, older siblings pressed into service before they fully understand what they are carrying. Other nursing mothers who feed the infant when the primary mother cannot. This is not generosity. It is not cultural practice. It is the biological infrastructure without which the species does not continue. The infant was so helpless, so demanding, so difficult to sustain with only 2 caregivers, that evolution selected hard and repeatedly for adults who could not psychologically walk away from a crying infant. The group that felt that pull survived. The group that didn't thinned. Here is the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind now. If community was always the essential infrastructure, what happens when you remove it? We will get there. But first, the story gets darker. We cannot know the story of any specific mother who lived in the Stone Age. No names survive, no accounts. But anthropologists, studying the patterns of hunter-gatherer societies, believe situations like this one likely happened countless times. Picture a woman. She lives in a band of roughly 30 people somewhere in what is now East Africa, about 80,000 years ago. She gives birth during the rainy season. The birth is difficult. She loses blood. For the first week, she cannot move far from camp, cannot carry her infant any distance. She can barely eat. Her infant is alive, hungry, crying. 2 women from the band begin feeding the baby. One is her mother's age. The exact details of any individual story are impossible to recover, but anthropologists have documented cases of extended breastfeeding, wet nursing, and alloparental care across traditional societies worldwide. Women feeding infants that were not biologically theirs, not as extraordinary acts, but as ordinary practice. The other lost her own infant 3 weeks earlier. Her supply never fully dried. Between them and the infant's recovering mother, the baby is fed across the crisis. A girl of 11 is assigned to carry the infant during the afternoon movement. She has done this before. Every child in this band above the age of 8 has been part of this system in some form, not as assigned labor, but as absorbed practice. It is simply what the group does. The grandmother knows which plants reduce fever. She has used them for 40 years. She is the group's accumulated medical knowledge, walking. This infant survives, not because of anything exceptional about the infant, not because of remarkable luck or physical strength, because 30 people, operating on shared instinct and generational practice, built a survival system around a creature that could not survive without one. That system had no name, no theory behind it, nobody designed it. It emerged because without it, there were no humans. Now, the part most versions of this story quietly skip. Many babies didn't make it. Across most of human prehistory, childhood mortality was brutal by any modern measure. Studies of pre-industrial populations and contemporary hunter-gatherer societies consistently show that a significant portion of all children born did not reach adulthood. Some estimates for early Stone Age populations suggest close to half. That number needs space. This was not a world where childhood was dangerous, but survival was mostly expected. This was a world where parents buried children routinely, where grief over infant death was not a rare tragedy but a near universal human experience, where every parent knew the odds before the child was born, and yet the species continued. And here is why this matters more than the number itself. That mortality rate was also a selection pressure. Communities that cooperated effectively likely gave their infants better odds of survival. The adults whose instinct to respond to infant need, even the need of infants that weren't theirs, was strongest, may have been the ones whose groups endured longest. Every generation, that cooperative pattern had a chance to deepen. The groups that sustained it outlasted the groups that didn't. But there was another survival system operating inside every infant's body that no Stone Age parent understood, and that modern science has only recently begun to map properly. Breast milk, not primarily as food, though it is that, as immunology. The first milk a mother produces after birth colostrum is saturated with antibodies. It is a direct biological transfer of the mother's accumulated immune response to the specific pathogens in the local environment. The infant's immune system, undeveloped and open, receives a targeted briefing about exactly what threats exist in this precise place. Local diseases, local bacteria, local dangers. Modern formula can replicate the nutritional content of breast milk with remarkable precision. It cannot replicate the antibody transfer. That is locally calibrated, specific to the mother's environment, built from her 30 or 40 years of survival in that particular corner of the world. Breast milk was the first pharmacy. Long before pharmacies existed, it was personalized, locally produced, passed from one generation to the next through the body rather than through language. No Stone Age parent understood the mechanism. Fleming would not discover penicillin for another 300,000 years. But the mechanism worked without anyone understanding it the way most things that keep us alive have always worked. Fast forward to now. We built hospitals, we built vaccines, antibiotics, neonatal intensive care units, formula, incubators, and baby monitors. We built everything the Stone Age never had. Infant mortality has dropped to a fraction of what it was, one of the genuine, unambiguous triumphs of human civilization. But something happened at the same time, something quieter and slower and easy to miss in the noise of progress. In many parts of the modern world, the network became smaller. The nuclear family, 2 adults, their children, a separate house, largely managing alone, is one of the most historically unusual childcare structures in the entire human story. The grandmother, who now lives an hour away instead of in the same shelter. The aunt across town. Shared nursing replaced by formula purchased alone. The cooperative band of 30 replaced by 2 parents and a baby monitor in a house no one else enters. The biology has not changed. Human infants still require the same density of care they required 80,000 years ago. Human mothers still experience the same hormonal depletion after birth, the same neurological vulnerability, the same physical need for rest and support. The nervous system still runs on ancient code that was written for a world of 30 people who were always present. Modern medicine dramatically improved infant survival. That is not a small thing. It is one of the most significant achievements in human history, and it should not be minimized. But medicine solved different problems than community did. Vaccines address pathogens. Antibiotics address infection. Neonatal care addresses premature birth. None of those technologies address the neurological depletion of a mother running on no sleep, no support, and no one else in the house. None of them address the weight of managing an infant's constant need without another adult present. Research on postpartum depression suggests that social isolation may play a significant role in its development and severity. Rates appear higher in settings where new parents are managing largely alone compared to communities where cooperative childcare remains the norm. Some researchers argue this is not coincidental that a nervous system built for a world of 30 people, suddenly operating with none of them present, generates exactly the distress signal it was built to generate. Here is what the Stone Age actually teaches, not as nostalgia, but as a precise observation about what human beings are built to need. The assumption that adults are designed to manage difficulty alone is recent and culturally specific. The biological record does not support it. Humans are not a solo species that sometimes cooperates for convenience. We are a cooperative species that sometimes finds itself alone. Those are not the same thing. The infant that survived the Stone Age survived because someone reached for it who had no strict obligation to do so. A grandmother past her reproductive years, a woman whose own child had died, who still had milk, who fed someone else's baby without being asked. None of them had a theory. They responded to a cry. They stayed. Nobody called it cooperation. Nobody called it childcare theory. They simply did what human beings had evolved to do. And that is the real answer to the question the thumbnail asked. Human babies survived the Stone Age because biology and community worked together. One gave them a chance, the other kept them alive. That response is still inside every human being alive today. The only question is whether the structure of modern life gives it anywhere to land. The human baby that cried in the Stone Age dark was not supposed to survive. No armor, no speed, no natural weapons, no developed immune system, no capacity for independent movement. Completely dependent on the willingness of adults, most of them not its parents, to reorganize their lives around a need they could not ignore. And yet, those babies survived. Not all of them, not easily, but enough. And their survival drove the cooperation instinct deeper into every generation that followed. The group that kept the infant alive learned something no other species learned, in the same way that the survival of the most vulnerable was not separate from the survival of everyone. It was the same thing. We did not build civilization despite raising the most dependent infants on Earth. In many ways, we built civilization because raising them required cooperation. The helplessness created the pressure. The pressure built the habit of cooperation. And the habit of cooperation, accumulated across hundreds of thousands of years, built everything else: the villages, the shared knowledge, the division of labor, the medicine that eventually made no doctors a solvable problem. There were no doctors in the Stone Age. But there was something that came first, something that made doctors possible. There was each other.